All right, so we're here with Shannon. We are here to ultimately discuss your fundraiser, but I think it's important to give backstory to, things of that nature. Um, so we're just going to give you an opportunity to kind of, discuss yours and Luis's story. From, if you'd like, all the way from Guatemala to here, if you want.
Oh, I guess to start with here and kind of go back and forth. So, we have been in Louisville since 2009. We fled from Guatemala in the night. My husband was an investigative journalist. He was working with a major paper that had an investigative team. He published anonymously for safety. He had been looking into corruption by different presidents, some of which have subsequently gone to jail. And we got a call from the German consul general. So not the US Embassy, the German consul called us. I was pregnant with our youngest, and this was in Guatemala still in 2008, December of 2008. Brought us to a private country club, had his bodyguards kind of look out, took us off to a corner and said, you guys have little kids. You're about to have another. You're really great people. We really love you a lot, but you need to leave as quietly as you can, as soon as you can. And we said, okay. He said, you're on a hit list. He said, I have sources that have confirmed it. We said, we can't go like this, right? So we decided to very quietly start to prepare to go. And this was not the first time. So we had been in hiding in 2003 for both of our works. I had worked at the Human Rights Office of the Arch-diocese of Guatemala, where the head of the Recovery of Historic Memory Project, Remy, he was murdered 2 days after that report was presented. And that was basically a report about the Guatemalan genocide, but from the perspective of the victims, not the official government or military or oligarchy stories. So my job on the mental health team was to be in these communities, be present at exhumations, providing that mental health support as people either found or didn't find relatives in these that had been buried in clandestine mass graves. We also trained other people in sort of, mental health first aid all over the country. And so in 2003, Luis and I were married. So I had been doing that work, and then I was actually shifting into some other community work. Luis was doing the work as the investigative reporter. And so in 2003, our house was broken into, and they only took things that were very trite and meaningful to us, which in Guatemala is the government's way of saying we know exactly who you are. So what they took was the first present that each of us gave to each other when we were engaged, basically, and then threw papers around, took our favorite music. They literally went through our music collection and only took our most favorite CDs. Again, they left money, they left credit cards, they left jewelry.
So they had like a very specific dossier.
It was intimidation, and they wrote escape on our house. And they did also take some papers. They went through all our diskettes, and they took our computer, which had some of our work. Luckily, my stuff was in the old diskettes. So part of what they missed was, another thing I did was declassify US documents, or translate those declassified US documents. to support some of the human rights cases about human rights violations in this particular setting against people who had ties with the US. So I was looking at and translating US Embassy cables, State Department stuff, military analysis, like all of the intel, some 800 pages. So luckily that diskette had a bug in it, had a virus, and it was password, or it was encrypted. So they didn't get that, thankfully. But anyway, so we'd had multiple experiences because we were working on the ground, working with human rights organizations. We had our oldest, because our youngest wasn't born, but out in the streets with us, right? My boss, the bishop, was murdered in 1998. My friend Barbara Ford was murdered. She was another mental health worker, a therapist. She was killed on May 5th of 2001. So, and then we moved here. Both had to take a break to heal, right? So, mental health is central, not in terms of just what I offer other people, but also knowing that, there are times when we also step back, right? So when I talk to people, and Luis and I talk to people about social movement, that's partly what the movement means. Sometimes we move forward to the front lines, and sometimes we move back for some self-care.
Yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup, and that's something that was instilled into me during the 2020 Breonna Taylor uprising, right? Protesters talked about that
Right.
extensively, and
Yeah.
honestly, you were a part of making protesters talk about that because of the work that you were doing, right?
Right. So I was one of the people who quickly joined the initiative of the Therapists for Protester Wellness. Even before that time, when I opened my private practice, because like I said, I took some years off. When I reopened a practice here in Louisville, Luis and I kind of made a commitment that we were going to work for the people, with the people. Like that's our calling. That's what we do. That's the example. That's the world we want for our kids. Um, so Luis started La Esquina. I actually started it before the 2016, which is a local language or local Spanish language site. So he does reporting in Spanish. So he's not just pulling stuff that's already translated off the wire from whoever, wherever. He's actually going out and,
Right.
trying to highlight things that are important for people who are trying to adjust to life here, right? So he does that mostly for free. There's, every now and then people do a pay dad, but it's the love of his life, right?
Yeah, when
Um,
we met him out early in the protests, him and I kind of exchanged words, and he explained to me, what he was doing, and I was like, blanket statement, anything of mine you need to use, please translate it. Like,
yeah, yeah. So that was his commitment, and mine was to work outside of the mental health, the community mental health setting in a private practice. So to give people access to an experienced mental health professional without having to have a diagnosis if it wasn't needed for help, but also to really work with the people who wouldn't be able to even afford a community mental health center, or in going to a community mental health center would have access to free therapy, but most likely with a student, because most of the time if you get free therapy, you get student after student after student after student, which is great for the students. And I went through that training myself, but there's a point when we're dealing with really traumatized folks, and for me, working with undocumented people, most of that I have lived through, in part what they've lived through. I've
yeah,
watched my husband, um, yeah, he had lots of family members killed in the war. Like I said, I had friends killed after the war. You know, this is marked our lives. So I wanted to make sure that people had access to quality, that they could come, that they could feel safe. Um, that it was somebody who could understand the context and the culture. So I started working with undocumented immigrants and started working with activists too, because that's the other part of what we did is through some of the court cases in Guatemala is we worked with the lawyers. Like, so we would be there in case in the middle of a court hearing, lawyer had a panic attack and we were right there to like take a break, let's step outside, let's do some breathing, let's calm down, we can do this, go back in. Here's, I mean, and so with the uprising, well, so even before the uprising, Occupy ICE happened, and that was again, like, yeah, we're here. Of course we are. We brought our kids down, and so this is community. This is what we do. This is how we build something different. We are there for each other, in whatever way we could be. And so same for the uprising. So by the time of the uprising with COVID, I had been diagnosed with several pretty serious chronic illnesses, several of whom have elements of really hitting my immune system. So I was in danger being out in the streets. So for me, we kind of decided it was more important for Luis to be out and making sure that there would be somebody in Spanish explaining what's going on, because again, some of our immigrants are like, whoa, this is really scary. It's like, well, let's try and explain what's going on here, so that they're not as scared, right? And so I kind of took a more backline, back seat, staying at home, manning crisis, so um I was available to work with people when there were some, without naming details, right? But some pretty awful things that happened, and I was in one of the safe places
Right.
working with people as they came in, right, to kind of protect my health, but also to be sure that people could get one-on-one attention, and helping to make sure that we therapists networked together and got that word out and got that support out. So that's where our energy is. That's where we live. That doesn't fit very well in a capitalist society.
Yeah.
Because I do not charge any of my Black clients. That's just a reparations thing. I just, again, we made a really early on decision. Most of my Spanish speaking clients also are not charged. They can, and some do pay sometimes anyway, but that is on them. And so my expectation in my practice is that those who have privilege and have access to resources are the ones who pay. So I tried to start a Patreon that did not really take off. And so we ended up, as my health got worse, with just having accumulating debts, things that it became impossible to pay because, and so that was sort of the impetus of this. Okay, now, I've started getting calls of people like, oh yeah, your home's coming up for sale. Let's buy it out from under you first. I can give you a better offer. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. So since I was sitting at home with round 3 of COVID, and had another infection on top of it, it's like I gotta do something.
Yeah.
And just that belief of we give to the community and we offer what we can when we can. And what I learned in Guatemala is when you ask, community responds. And so, we live in a world where healthcare is very expensive. If I were paying retail for my current medications, it would be $12,000 every month. Even on, even with traditional like work or employee, or employer insurance, so when I had the good insurance, so to speak, before I reopened my private practice and started working for myself, we already were accumulating medical debt. And that was just with one of my autoimmunes, right? Because you have to meet the deductible. And then on top of that, they would only cover 80%, but when I'm getting MRIs and getting all
Yeah.
kinds of labs that are far beyond what most people would normally get, it's not just a, blood count of this and that. It's,
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff. So we also realized pretty quickly that Medicaid was a really important service that we need. And so our commitment has been to be in the trenches, to live in community with community, um, so that we can, very clearly qualify for Medicaid. But what that also means is that there's a lot of bills that we can't pay. And the worst part of it is sort of the predatory, um, the predatory lenders, right? So credit cards, we canceled our credit cards, but, for a while they were charging 30% interest
Yep.
every month. And that's apparently okay in this country. Um, we had somebody buy the debt when we couldn't pay our property tax last year. He immediately doubled it. And it's like, oh, you can't pay 3,000. Okay, well, you have a week to pay 6,000. It's like, if we couldn't pay three, how do you think we could pay six?
Yeah, right.
Really? And that's considered good business in this city, in addition to the gentrification in our neighborhood. So our property taxes significantly increased during the pandemic when everybody was really struggling. A lot of my clients were out of work either because they were sick or they were in and out of work or they were gig economy workers. And so they weren't getting relief either, which meant that some of the paying clients I had could no longer pay. Luis couldn't do any of the music, which is how he's also helped to supplement income.
Yeah.
There were no concerts. It wasn't safe.
Right.
So yeah, confluence
So
of things.
yeah, it put even more stress on you because of the high percentage of pro bono clients that you take on. So the ones that were actually paying you full price to help supplement that couldn't pay anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we're so hesitant, and I can't imagine a lot of the folks that I work with, saying at some point, I'm sorry, because the commitment I made was because I've been in the place of, having been in my own therapy and getting to the point of, sorry, I don't offer a sliding scale or my two slots are full. So, I guess we're going to have to end because you can't pay me. And so I've had that experience and I made a commitment a long time ago that no, I will never not work with somebody or end that kind of relationship if they can't pay. I can't ethically do that. Like for me, the ethical commitment is if I'm making a commitment to work with somebody on their healing journey and accompany them, then that's a commitment. And they're the only ones who can say no. I'm done or I'm switching or that's not on me because that's what community is. We're here for each other. That's what it's about. And so I have never been able to do, and Luis either, perhaps it's impractical, perhaps it's, pie in the sky, but we're here for each other. And I can't turn it into a capitalist business model, which says, but only if I have excess. I just can't do that. That's just not who I am.
Right.
So we ended up in just this very scary place of okay, now we can't put this off any longer. We really, really, really have to come forward and just hope. And the people have been so wonderful and so generous.
Right. So
Um,
you had a GoFundMe up that you have reached the goal on, but now the Collective Liberation Network has kind of stepped in and is going to help continue to crowdsource for you, correct?
yes, yes. And some of that is because I in talks, I don't want to feel or come across as greedy or selfish. So it's hard for me to ask in the first place. So then to keep raising it, I really, don't want people to think that we're trying to take advantage or exploit On the other hand, though, when they said, yes, but could you use more? Do you have more bills than that realistically? And yeah, I do. We know that there are upcoming bills. Ironically, today we took the car in for an oil change and turns out it needs $800 worth of work. So it's just like, man, really? And that's what it means living at that community level. We are in the trenches. We do get it. We offer when we can. We are asking now, so there are upcoming needs. I am going to have to go down to Nashville for some autoimmune testing on my autonomic nervous system. So sort of my system's out of whack in terms of swallowing, breathing, digesting,
Just
uh
listening.
heart rate. And there is not a single medical center in the state of Kentucky that offers that. My insurance won't cover it. Vanderbilt said we will do it for free. But of course, we got to get there. It's going to be multiple trips down to Nashville in a car that hopefully works, which is why we're getting the car fixed.
Right.
It's going to mean hotels. It's going to mean, I'm probably going to have to get biopsies. So there's going to be some recovery. So that's, again, time. And I'm so grateful that I have Luis as a partner and, my co-conspirator. So, but it means time off for both of us. So, there are these big gaps because of my health, that mean that oftentimes both of us need to be off of work because I've had several surgeries already. I have at least two more coming up in the next few months. Each one of those is at least a week, and in many cases, 2 to 3 weeks off seeing my clients. So it's this, we don't live in a sustainable world if you live at a certain level or if you need a certain type of service. um and that's just the reality that a lot of people can't see because they've never been in the trenches. They've yeah. um
Well,
I don't know how else to explain it.
I can definitely empathize. I live in probably a lower tax bracket. And I struggle from time to time. A lot of the majority of the reporting that I do, similar to Luis,
Yeah,
is pro bono, right? So it doesn't contribute
yeah,
to helping me pay my bills, right? Sometimes it even compounds on my bills because I've got to pay for something to
yeah,
be able to go do something, right? um
yeah. It's we live in a world in which a lot of the most important work is with people who are deliberately invisibilized, and then that work is not seen as work. It's seen as a volunteer gig every once in a while. It is work. It's important work. And I don't think our skills and talents should be tied to a capitalist job. I feel like our work is our work, and everybody, there's room for everybody, and there definitely is, um there's definitely wealth for everyone. If but I guess it depends on how we view it, scarcity or abundance, right?
right.
And so I can't imagine. I think I would die a slow death not doing the work that I do well, and working for this decolonized, world in which human rights are centered as the most important thing and the things that provide us with, um, happiness and joy. You know, I don't think Luis, I think he would die a slow death if he weren't out in the streets and also trying to help others adjust, because it was really, really hard for him to adjust to life here. He had never lived here before, and we would not have come here, um, if we didn't, so the first time we went into hiding in 2003, we decided not to move. We were told to move at that point too. Um, but we felt much more vulnerable with the kids. And we're like, and I looked at him one day, I said, I can't imagine having to explain to my kids, that we deliberately chose for you to be a martyr for the cause. Like, I can't do that. So sometimes, even though there's a part of me that still feels guilty, I can't do that either. It's not about being a martyr. That does happen, but not, I can't willingly do
Right.
that. And, he felt the same. Like, yeah, no, we both want to be around for our kids. But our work here, and our insistence of um being in the community, being with the people, being out in the streets as we're able to, is really, really important for our kids. Growing up as, mixed white and Latine kiddos, they've seen a lot too already. And at least this way they say, yes, but we're doing something about it. We're speaking up when we need to. We are going to change this world, whether it's, because we did take them down to Breonna Taylor Square as well. So we actually, it was really kind of cool because our youngest came out at um, the Pride Parade that was arranged.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was sort of the first, like, so they wore a shirt that said, let's get one thing straight, I'm not. And it's like, yeah, this is, out here in the streets with these people in the square. Um, this is where it's at. And, yeah, this is where we make ourselves vulnerable, and we trust and commit to everyone's well-being, not just our own. That's just what we're about, or try to be anyway.
Well,
So
Shannon, I absolutely appreciate your time and your efforts, with the therapist protest wellness, and any other work that you do. Same thing with Luis. I appreciate, his willingness to be out there, in the shit, you know.
it's really kind of funny because since we'd both been in tear gas often in Guatemala. So I actually, one of my offices was 2 blocks away from the Congress there. And so it was pretty frequent to have the tear gas float over into my office. So it was really
Yeah.
funny because everybody was using milk, and, Luis whips out, because I made him leave the house with his bottle of vinegar because vinegar works much better. And he's like, no, 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 here, take the vinegar,
Yeah.
passing it around.
I do not miss that at all.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I will, make sure that all the links and everything are shared out, so people know where they can donate, through either the, CLN or through the GoFundMe, however they feel comfortable. I'll just make sure that gets out there. Is there any, last thoughts, words that you would like to share with anybody that happens to be viewing?
I think just how grateful we are to be a part of this community, and just, our commitment is, using the resources wisely, but also our continued commitment to be with the community and in the community and work for the community, even if it doesn't have a salary, because
Yeah.
community is what's most important.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate your time and all your efforts. And we're gonna see what we can do to help you out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.